Vani, we have plenty of time in this segment. Please continue with this story. I'm captivated by it. You were jaded by politics, Bobby Kennedy. You were an Obama activist, and now walk us through this journey. It's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, I have kind of bowed out of politics for a long time lately because, again, with the COVID years, with my activism that I had during the Obama years, I used my delegate status at the Democratic National Convention to actually protest in front of the Secretary of Agriculture. So that's kind of how I entered the national stage, if you will. I held up a sign, I wrote it with my lipstick saying label GMOs. And at the time, we didn't know whether there was a product that was bioengineered or not on grocery store shelves. No one knew whether they were eating GMOs or not. And I felt like that was a lot of lack of transparency, considering Europe and other countries had given their citizens the opportunity to bow out of this kind of chemical intensive agriculture. And now we know that this chemical intensive agriculture is causing cancer and autoimmune disorders and all sorts of chronic diseases here in America. And it's really up to us to get the chemicals out of our food supply. What I've realized is that nobody's holding these food companies and chemical companies accountable. And someone like myself, someone like others out there that are nonprofit organizations like the Environmental Working Group, the NRDC, Center of Science and Public Interest, and others are out there doing this advocacy work, but they are literally railroaded in Congress. They're trying to have these conversations with Democrats and Republicans, and they're really having a hard time getting a lot of this stuff to be, regulated, because the food companies come in and they say, you know what, we're going to fund the competitor to your boss's campaign. And so you're no longer going to have a job. And so it's like the food and chemical corporations are literally funding electors to make sure that we stay in the system. And then they fund the research that's conducted at the NIH. They're funding the CDC, the FDA. And so none of this information can get out. The truth can't get out about the chemicals in our food. And that's a big issue. And that's why I think the only way forward from this standpoint, we cannot continue on the path that we've been continuing on. We have to have someone to come in and disrupt the situation. And even this week, I saw something very interesting. There was a Policies for the People portal put about, and I think it was, RFK introduced it under Team Trump. I'm not really sure what the political piece of it was, but I was just thumbing through there, and I couldn't believe that one of the top issues in this that was submitted by the American people for the government to address was to ban artificial food dyes. That this would make one of the top searches, in the first, had over 13 million votes. This is something the American people want. Cancer is not Democrat or Republican. This is something we have to come together to fix. Why, in my Senate roundtable at the end of my testimony, I invited both candidates to come to Battle Creek, Michigan, to hold these American food companies accountable for this, because it's not just Kellogg's doing this. Yes, they are doing it, and they're targeting little children, and I think that's why we have to address them first. But McDonald's is doing it. McDonald's has 3 ingredients that they use in the UK in their French fries, and salt is optional. Then you have 11 ingredients here in the United States. One of those ingredients is an ingredient that you would find in silly putty. It's called dimethyl polysiloxane. And when you dig down deep and you look in the FDA papers, it can be preserved with formaldehyde, a neurotoxin. Like, why are we frying our fries here in America with this substance and not in other countries? The whole entire framework of chemical regulation has to be looked at, and we have to dismantle it.
I want to play tape from Senator Ron Johnson's testimony, who's amazing, from Wisconsin. This is your testimony here that's gone viral. Let's play cut 119, please.
In the US, there's 11 ingredients. In the UK, there's 3, and salt is optional. An ingredient called dimethyl polysiloxane is an ingredient preserved with formaldehyde, a neurotoxin. This is Skittles. Notice the long list of ingredient differences. 10 artificial dyes in the US version and titanium dioxide. This ingredient is banned in Europe because it can cause DNA damage. Artificial dyes are made from petroleum, and products containing these dyes require a warning label in Europe, and they have been linked to cancer and disruptions in the immune system. Gatorade. In the US, they use red 40 and caramel color. In Germany, they don't. They use carrot and sweet potatoes to color their Gatorade. This is Doritos. The US version has 3 different artificial dyes and MSG. The UK version does not.
Okay, so Vani, like, just for an audience member, this shouldn't be hard. We are the wealthiest country ever. We seemingly are able to solve simple problems, or at least we used to be. What needs to get done for this to change? Is it as simple as corporate actors that just want to make money, that are trying to make an easy buck and increase addiction via our food that keep it this way? Is that the explanation, or is there something more sinister going on here?
Well, we have to look at the regulations in terms of what chemicals are allowed for use here in the United States. And we need to actually force food manufacturers to prove that chemical is safe before they use it here in the United States. They can't just, create a chemical in a lab or a new food substance and, submit some paperwork. They know the FDA doesn't have the manpower or the know-how to review all of this data, and it just gets rubber stamped and it gets marked as generally regarded as safe. There was a chemical recently, actually an ingredient that entered the American food supply, and a smoothie company was using it, and it was called TerraFlower. And it not only sickened people, it made people have emergency gallbladder surgery to have their gallbladder removed. This ingredient was a new ingredient. It didn't have any safety data around it, and the FDA took 2 years to even address it. So think about all the people that were harmed in that time frame. We have other situations, and this one is probably the most egregious. It is absolutely insane. Red number 3 is an ingredient that's allowed in lipstick, right? Not allowed in lipstick, not allowed in chemicals, but you can eat it. The maraschino cherry industry lobbied Congress back when they banned this chemical because it causes cancer. They lobbied them to keep it in, and because the alcohol interest was so heavy, they were able to keep it completely fine to use in food so that the maraschino cherries stayed bright red in all those alcoholic drinks that were popular at the time.
And so this can be changed through regulatory adjustments. And let me just be as clear as I can say, how hard is it to simply ban some of these chemicals? Say, we're done. We're not going to put up with this anymore.
California is doing it right now. They just banned red number 3. So in California, you can't use that, along with potassium bromate and a few other chemicals. California just submitted unanimous, it was voted unanimous, all Democrats, all Republicans, to ban artificial food dyes in schools in California. Okay, so this is something, again, that is bipartisan. This is something that every single American should listen to and find out about what they're eating. They need to start reading their ingredient list and understand the food that they're eating. I'm getting messages from the highest of A-list celebrities about these issues, like Eva Mendes. She's saying, how can I get involved? How can I support this? This is something that's crazy. I can't believe our own American companies are doing this. I'm going to personally boycott Kellogg's. And she made a post about this. Then Khloe Kardashian this morning posts our campaign as well and says, I can't believe it. I'm having my friends in Canada come in to the United States and bring me Fruit Loops, and they taste the same, Bonnie. Why are these companies doing this? And I would have never known about any of this had I not seen this on your page. And so it's like, the highest levels, I think, of awareness are starting to take place about how poisoned our food system is, and it's up to us to keep spreading the word. We're not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for the government to do something.
It has to be activist driven, and it has to be bottom up, but there needs to be a top down perspective too. And so, Vani, if I could, and I'm not sure even how you're going to answer, how are you thinking about this election? Someone who was literally at the DNC for Obama, someone who was jaded by politics. How are you now viewing this contest?
Well, I'm really being very cautious in that I think it's so important to work with both sides of the aisle when it comes to these issues. And so, and that's why at the end of my Senate roundtable, I invited both presidential candidates. I have been reaching out to the Harris-Walz campaign. I've been going on podcasts, on media interviews. I've been talking about this. I have not heard back from them. And it is really sad, actually, because, I've been on other podcasts of people that have been kind of on that spectrum, on the left spectrum for most of their life, thinking that, that was the party of environmental regulation, about chemicals, getting that out of our environment. And now, because RFK has teamed up with Trump, this situation is a lot different, and that RFK is allowing us to have a national stage on these issues that we've never had before. I don't think I would have been invited to Senator Ron Johnson's Senate roundtable without some executive leadership at that level saying it's okay to talk about these issues. I'm just thinking about over the last month, how many people I have reached with this message as a result of that executive leadership. And that's really what we need when we talk about removing these chemicals from the American food system. We need executive leadership. We need Harris and Walz to talk about these issues too, and they're not. Where are they? Where are all the Democratic leaning mainstream media out there too? Like, none of them will have me on, because Kellogg's and General Mills and McDonald's and all of these companies, I name names in the Senate roundtable, they pay their advertisers, and they will not have me on. And I've been through this before. I've been an activist for a long time. I was dragged through the mud after I got Subway to remove chemicals and Kraft to remove chemicals and Starbucks to remove chemicals. They did whatever they could to shut me up using paid for experts
That's
that I
what they
found
do.
out later through, which I found out later through Freedom of Information Request Acts, where the chemical corporations were paying quote unquote independent professors at these universities to literally show up every single time I was talked about.
That's the model. Vani, I think you're an American hero. I think you do great. Where are the Democrats? Good question. I know that you have a home here in the Charlie Kirk Show, and I know that President Trump and Bobby Kennedy will make this a priority of the administration.